Hey, we are live. I am Justin, also known as the DIY Audio Guy. I am here, as always, with my partner in crime, the one and only Nick from Toyd's DIY Audio. Nick, how are you?
I'm a little sick, a little under the weather.
I hate to hear that, man. That's not fun at all.
You know, what's fun about it, though, is that you get to do more talking.
And well, that's going to be a problem in a few minutes when my internet cuts out, because it always cuts out about the first 15 minutes of the show. So there we are.
That is funny.
Awesome. So we're doing a Q&A tonight, Nick. It is we're trying to move the show in the direction of Q&A sessions and having guests on the show, because I don't know about you, Nick, but I've reached the point where I get so many questions in the comments that I just can't get to them all anymore. And I'd love to answer everyone's question. So I'm going to try to make a forum here to answer questions when people have questions. Is that what we're doing, Nick?
Well, one of my favorite shows that I used to listen to on NPR was Car Talk. And Car Talk was a great show on NPR, which is about cars, but two guys actually joking a lot. But they do answer people's questions about their cars, what's going on, what's wrong, what they should look at, and things of that nature. And I think there's a lot of truth out there. There's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation about there that it's kind of nice to get another opinion on what's going on. What questions do you have that you want answered? And you can get our opinion on those. And if we have videos or tests that we've done to support that evidence, we'll go ahead and send you in that direction. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And if you're in the chat and you have a question for us, the best way to let us know that you are asking a question as opposed to just chatting with the chat, because the chat gets real active sometimes, is to denote that it is a question by typing the word question at the beginning, or maybe even just a Q. The other thing, of course, you can always do is throw out that super chat. The super chat's the best way to make sure that your question gets answered. The system automatically flags the super chats, and so we don't miss them that way. You don't have to throw out a super chat to get your question answered. That's not a requirement, but it makes it easier for us to see your question, and maybe move if we get off topic or on a tangent or something like that, and someone asks a question as a super chat. It's easier for us to get back on topic, which is answering questions.
Well, and the other caveat to that, and just real quick caveat to that, is if you do send a super chat out, it is a question that we will answer. Sometimes we get too many questions and we can't answer them all, but we will make sure if you super chat that we will answer your question.
So I got a question from the comment section in one of my videos, where many of my questions come from. Two questions. The follow-up question: I was told that you want about 20% overhead with your amps RMS, meaning if I have a 500 watt subwoofer, I want to hook up a 600 watt amplifier to that. And I would like to know, well, first of all, do you ever hear that advice in home audio? Because I hear similar advice in car audio all the time. And what do you think about that in car audio versus home audio?
Not as much. Of course, it's a little bit different in home audio, in the essence that a lot of people that are in home audio are designing the box from the ground up. And so they have a decent idea of how much power the subwoofer can handle already based off the box design that they've already designed it. So even though your subwoofer, for example, can take 1,000 watts peak and 500 watts RMS, for example, doesn't necessarily mean that once you put it inside the box, that that's a good thing or smart thing to do. Just because it can take that peak doesn't mean that once you put it in that box, that your subwoofer itself can actually handle that amount of power without over excursion or distortion or some type of damage to the system. And so we don't see that a lot in home audio. I do have some ideas of why I think people say that in car audio, although they're just guesses.
I noticed down in the chat real quick, I'm probably mispronouncing the wrong name correctly. Maduka, hello from Nigeria. It's awesome when people from all around the world join in. One of my favorite coworkers at work is a gentleman from Nigeria, and I was just chatting with him right before I left the office. So we're glad you're listening from wherever you are, whether it's the Pacific Northwest or Nigeria or wherever the case may be. I personally hate this advice, and I wish people would stop giving it. And I know that that is going to make a lot of people mad, but I think that it's bad advice. We should stop repeating this. And it's okay if you disagree with me. I know that Ambivalent One disagrees with me in the chat, and that's all right, because the world is not a simple place. And the first thing you have to realize, kind of the long answer, well, there's the short answer and the long answer. And the short answer is that the RMS ratings that are provided by the speaker manufacturer and the amp manufacturer are just shortcuts to something much more complicated that the average new consumer, just run-of-the-mill consumer, can use to match things up. So if the manufacturer says 500 watts for your speaker and your amp manufacturer says 500 watts, and they're both RMS ratings, and the manufacturer doesn't lie about their ratings, 90% of the people out there are going to be just fine matching it up. And that's kind of the short answer.
Yeah, here's another thing. Okay. So Ambivalent says my Ultimax is rate at 800, I give them 2K. And there's nothing wrong with that. Here's the issue that a lot of people don't think about. Maybe your amplifier says it's 2K. Is it actually 2K? For example, if you buy an iNuke 3000, does it get 3000 watts? No, it's not. It says it's 3000 watts. It's not 3000 watts. And so some of the times when people say this, car audio, unfortunately, in general, has had a really bad rap of being misrepresentative of their numbers. So I think some of that comes from the misrepresentation of the numbers. The other part of that is if you have an 800 watt and for example, your subwoofer can take 800 watts RMS all day long. No problem with that. If you buy an 800 watt amplifier, then a lot of people don't understand how you're actually getting the 800 watts. Well, you have to turn your potentiometer all the way up. Mm-hmm. That could cause distortion, things of that nature. So yeah, maybe at that point in time, maybe it's worth getting 1,000 or 1,200 watt amplifier just so you don't have to turn it up that much. But the thing is, you're not actually giving it, a lot of people don't realize they're not giving it the amount of wattage that they think they are. Like a lot of people think because they buy an amplifier that says 2,000 watts, that it's outputting 2,000 watts all the time. And that's just not the case. That's just not how that works.
And Ambivalent One, who said earlier in the chat that he likes to throw 50% more power at his subwoofers, he's hit the nail on the head. There's this thing called power factor. So whenever you're sending power to a speaker, the voltage and the amperage are going to be out of phase. They're not going to hit the speaker at the exact same time. And because of that, you're never going to get the actual peak wattage. So your 500 watt amp very rarely is going to actually give you all 500 watts into your subwoofer. Now, some amps are built better than others. I just did a test of that Stinger amp and was able to get almost 1,200 watts out of a 700 watt amplifier. And so that's an amp that's built properly and so forth and so on. But if you're looking at a cheap amp that's not built right, yeah, you do need a little bit more power if you're going to get all that power. But then the question is, can your subwoofer actually handle the extra power you're throwing at it? Even though it may never get the full power of the amp, the subwoofer might not be able to handle even the full power of the amp. So that's the first thing, is the power factor. And the second thing is impedance rise, commonly called the dreaded word box rise.
Which is not a thing
about this. Yeah, Nick and I were talking about this before. Nick said box rise isn't real. So you think
that's not. No, box rise. Your impedance changes when you put it inside a box. That's obviously true, right? And depending on what size of box, depending on what box you put in, depends on what changes. A lot of things change. Your Q changes as well. A lot of things change. I'm just saying, box rise. The term box rise isn't really like, I don't know where like it came, like all of a sudden someone just like came up with box rise and then they just started calling it that. But it's impedance rise. But yeah, there is an impedance rise.
And what that mostly deals with is different frequencies are going to have a different AC resistance, and it'll be different depending on the box.
And not only that, it's only very little frequencies. It's not like it's like the whole frequency range, right?
Right.
So we're talking about a spike in your impedance and a very little frequency range. And then once again, that goes back to where you're giving it power. And we talked about this before the show. If you know enough to know, okay, in this range, I can set up a DSP and I don't have to limit with as much power, go right ahead. But if you think, hey, look, I can go across the entire frequency range because of box rise or impedance rise, whatever you want to call it, that's just not true.
Right. Right. What you're going to
Right.
find is that
Here's what AJC said. What I want to, I'm sorry. And he's right. And this is exactly what we're talking about. With sealed or even some vented, ported, and actually I'd say more with ported than sealed even, people don't realize you hit Xmax before reaching the RMS power of the transducer. And in this case, we're talking about a subwoofer. And he's absolutely right. And that's why I think, like I said earlier, it's less likely in home audio because we're doing a lot of that modeling to see what is the RMS that we can handle, that box can handle, not the subwoofer. The subwoofer in the box, the entire kit and caboodles. I said kit and caboodles.
So this right here is the last build I did on my channel. It's a pair of 10 inches. These are the Dayton Audio. These are the reference series. So they're the aluminum cone, and they sell 3 different versions of the reference series. They have the high fidelity, the high output, and the high excursion. This is the one in the middle of that. This is the high output. And according to the manufacturer, this is a 600 RMS speaker. I should be able to throw 1200 watts at this setup right here. But every time I modeled this in WinISD, I would always exceed Xmax, just shortly below the tuning frequency, and sometimes a bit above the tuning frequency at anything more than about 450 or 500 watts. So I wouldn't hook up that much power. I would not hook up 1200 watts to this setup. 1000,
no,
I think it'd be fine, but it's going to exceed Xmax.
Well, it depends.
The sound quality subwoofer.
If it's 1000 watts, it depends. If it's 1000 watts and you play below tuning at 1000 watts, you're very likely to damage your subwoofers.
And I've been doing that a little bit with this, and it's fine. This is I was showing this off to my brother, and I was playing some really low frequencies and cranking the hell out of it, and just to watch it move. And it took the abuse, but at the same time, you're past Xmax. So Xmax, for those who don't know, is the Xmax is. It's based on the amount of voice coil that's in the gap, right? It's a physical measurement that basically tells us here's how far we can travel before we lose magnetic force and therefore get distortion. So Xmax is not something that I would recommend ever exceeding unless you're doing some big SPL build and you just want to watch the subs move a whole lot. So this is allegedly a 1200 watt setup. I wouldn't do more than 1000 on it. And sure, with impedance rise and power factor, maybe I could throw 1500 watts at it, but I wouldn't. And it was plenty loud. It's plenty loud with 1000 watts. I've got a JP8 running on it right now, which will give me about 1000 to 1200, depending on the electrical. And it does just fine. But 20% more than rated power? No, not really. So,
I mean, once again, just this is where it goes back to designing the box with the subwoofer in mind, and then looking to see what you might or may not be concerned about. Is sound quality important? Is other, what's important to you? Jay Ads Holloway said, what is Xmax? Jads Holloway. Oh, so what is Xmax exactly? I'm new to car stereo. So we kind of mentioned it a little bit, but just to clarify, Xmax will be given by the manufacturer of the speaker or the subwoofer, whatever. They'll be said. So like if you go to Parts Express website or Kicker or anyone, it usually says this is the Xmax. Okay. Now, having said that, just because it says that's the Xmax doesn't mean that it can accept the amount of power to get to that Xmax, which is what Justin was saying with that particular box. So what's good to do is go into WinISD, model it, and it will show you. You can go to maximum power, for example, on WinISD, and it'll show you the maximum power it can take. Now, sometimes it'll be a full line going across. All right, this can handle 800 watts all the way across. Sometimes it'll say 800 watts, except when you hit 50 hertz. You hit 50 hertz, 350 watts, and then, or whatever. And so you want to look at that and see what's going on. So if, for example, it says it can take 3000 watts at 30 hertz, and you're doing an SPL burp competition at 30 hertz, do your thing.
Yeah.
Even if it can take only 100 watts somewhere else, it's just obviously not going to be the case, but you know what I'm saying.
Right. And Blake B gives a nice straightforward answer to what is Xmax. It's the most that a subwoofer can move before that movement becomes nonlinear. Nonlinear, that just means you're going to have distortion. How audible, I don't know. And the other number is Xmech. That's the mechanical limit. That's physically how far it can move before things break. So that is Xmax. And I feel like we answered 3 or 4 questions all at once. And it was kind of one of my questions. So Nick, you got a question from your end?
I don't. I mean, there's a lot, but I'd rather not talk right now. So I'm gonna let you answer another one.
All right, I will pull another one up real quick. I had a couple. Whoops, I was clicking on the wrong thing.
Start in there. I'll ask you one. Garrett W
Oh.
says, what is the difference between budget amps and something like JL? Some can be nearly double the price for the same RMS. Is there an audible difference between them? What is the money going towards or to?
Oh, so that's a complicated question. I am firmly in the camp that all watts sound the same. That's an opinion that I have. If you have 2 amplifiers that are both rated for 50 watts and they're operating within their power rating, they're not cranking up to distortion, that the average human being can't hear the difference between them. But there are differences in the quality. There are good amps and there are bad amps. I've got a couple of these little, those little amps they sell at Parts Express, the little tiny ones that sit on your desktop that just sound terrible, right? They muddy up the sound. If an amp is functioning properly, it shouldn't color the sound at all. It should sound just fine as long as you're not cranking it up past 1% total harmonic distortion. So if you're operating an amp inside of its intended operating range, they should all sound the same. Then you have amplifiers with more features. Then you have amplifiers with higher quality control. And I kind of lean more towards the direction of when I see a really expensive amp like that, I scratch my head and go, I don't know why you would pay more for it. A lot of times you pay more for things simply because of marketing. And sometimes some of these more prestige brands like to go onto the cutting edge. They like to always be pushing the next big thing, doing the research, trying to find the next best way to lay out their amplifier internally. But if that doesn't help the amp sound better, then doesn't help your music sound better, then what's the point? If that doesn't provide some of their benefit, like increased thermal efficiency, then what's the point? And I think that's maybe important. It's more than just how much power it puts out. It's what else can the amplifier do? For example, I remember a few years ago, Derek Williston tested some audio control amplifiers, and these things had really high efficiency numbers. So if that JL is super efficient, that means you don't need to upgrade your alternator, or maybe don't need to add an extra battery to run more power. So maybe that's why it's worth more. But for a company like JL, I think you're paying for the name.
So I agree and disagree all at once. I'm not going to say a watt sounds like a watt as simplified as Justin has said it, because I think in order for us to understand what he means by a watt sounds like a watt, we got to understand amplifiers a little bit better, right? So some of the things that we have to understand about amplifiers are, A, is the amplifier linear? So for example, I get a lot of questions. I got one actually today about why I did a test on 3 different amplifiers for home audio subwoofers. And it was a Dayton Audio, a Crown XTI series, which is the more expensive series, and a Behringer iNuke series. And they said, why didn't you do the XLS series? Well, if you take a look at the XLS series, and we went over this actually a couple weeks ago with another gentleman that was on the show with us. What you'll notice is the XLS is not linear. It's linear to about, I think it's about like 100 hertz, and then it starts dropping off. It has a 30 hertz high pass on it. It starts dropping off. And for a subwoofer, that's a pretty big deal, right? Because if you have a 30 hertz integrated high pass that you cannot bypass, then you're going to start losing that low end output, which makes a huge difference if you're going to be using it as a subwoofer. Now with car audio amplifiers, for example, one of the things that I do like with some of the more expensive amplifiers is a lot of them will have a variable high pass built in that you can add, that you can do. And some of the cheaper ones don't. And so I like that because then you can protect like ported subs or other subs if you need to. Now, the other thing that we want to make sure that we understand is that not all amplifiers have the same distortion rating. And so some of them will sound much worse than other ones. Now that's less important with subwoofers. However, there are some, even with subwoofers, that are so bad that you can actually hear the noise that's coming out of it, even when nothing's playing. And that's something that you're going to want to pay attention to as well. And some of the more expensive ones sometimes have worked those problems out. And that's not to say there's not great cheap ones out there, because that's just not true either. There are some really good cheap ones out there. I've reviewed some on my channel. Justin has seen some on his channel. So, but just keep that in mind. When we say watt is a watt, we're talking about, once we get down to the nitty gritty and we've measured distortion, we've got that out of the way, we got, linearity out of the way, then.
All right, let me give you a case study, Garrett. This is our case study right here. So this is the amp that I tested about 3 or 4 weeks ago on my channel. I saw this on Amazon, and I kind of had a facepalm when I saw it. I looked at this thinking, there's no way this could possibly be a good amplifier. The brand name is DuPont, of all the weird kind of brand names. And know if you can see it or not, but it says 1000W across it. So this is one of those amps that's being presented as if it is a 1000 watt amplifier. And it kind of looks like something from the 80s or the 90s. It's this kind of big, oversized amplifier. And it's got this acrylic case on the front, and it lights up on the front, and it made its rated power. So good for you, DuPont, making your rated power. But the amp also let out an audible noise from the amplifier. The instant I turned it on, I could hear it. And some commenters mentioned that it's probably because of the light on the front. And someone who had bought the amp said, yeah, they unhooked the light and it stopped humming. I wouldn't recommend this amplifier.
It's getting feedback. Yeah, yeah.
Right, exactly. You shouldn't have to go into the amp and unhook things for it to work. You should plug it in. It should work. And I guess I'm weird like that. You shouldn't have to DIY the internals of your amplifier. If you're going to do that, just build your own from scratch. I wouldn't recommend it. I can't imagine it can possibly sound good. It's way too big. I don't like it. I don't think it's a good amplifier. But if you want an amp that'll do 300 watts at 4 ohms mono, Bridget mono, and you want an amp where you can see the amp guts, there you go. It's something. Now, would I buy a JL? I don't know. JL's kind of pricey for what you get. So I don't much care for them. I think with a brand like JL, you are paying honestly for a lot of the name. But this right here, I don't know what you're paying for with this, because this is an old amp from it's just 40-year-old technology here. So somewhere in the middle is where you want to be.
And that Brian had said that too. The extra you're paying for is marketing, reliability, and after sales support. And I think in some cases that's actually really true. Some cases that's not true, but and
right.
Like it said, I changed my amp out, and when I did, my sub sounded different. And there is truth to that. So for example, if I were to take like my surround sound receiver and just play my speakers on them, they're going to sound good, but they're going to sound significantly better with something like a Buckeye amp. Why? Well, because it's cleaner sounding. There's not as much distortion. They're probably more linear than the one output that's coming out of mine. And then the other thing that's kind of neat about Buckeye amps too is they're pretty dynamic. And so, being able to give you those dynamics, of course, that some of that has to do with the power output being better as well, which obviously is going to make a difference.
All right, I got another amp to share with you here. Let me share the screen. All right, here is one I don't think I would recommend. And the reason why I don't recommend it is because they don't represent their power claims accurately. The box this amp came in said 3,000 watts all over it. It didn't even get 600 watts when I tested it. So, don't spend your money on something thinking it's a 3,000 watt amplifier when it's not. That's definitely something you don't want to do. I can promise you that JL amp that's really expensive is going to make every last bit of power and then some. It will do its power and more. So there's nothing wrong with the amp. It's just expensive is all. And I don't know that you're, getting a good value. Somewhere in the middle grounds where I would direct someone to be. The Stinger amp I just tested, I think is a good one. It seems to be.
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So one of the more cheaper amps is Behringer in the home audio. So Behringer is known to be inexpensive. They say like the NX3000 is 3,000 watts. And I think, Derek tested it. Don't quote me on this. You can watch his video. I think it did like 1,200 watts or something. It was significantly less than the 3000. Now, on top of that, I've talked to a lot of people, and unfortunately, a lot of the people that have had those amplifiers, they just haven't lasted as long. Now, for some people, that might be okay. They might say, okay, you know what? I can buy 2 or 3 of those before I buy like a Crown XTI. And I'm okay with that because I still haven't bought the Crown XTI yet. And if that's how you feel, then that's fine. I would rather have the Crown XTI and know that when I'm turning on my system, it's going to be working.
That's fair. Yeah, one that has a reputation for being reliable. That sounds fair.
Here's what Brian said. Behringer, never again for me. I tried 2, both failed within 2 years. And he's not alone. There's been a lot that have done that. And there have been some people that bought them and they've worked great for a long time as well. So I'm not gonna say that that's not the case either. But there are a lot of people that unfortunately that's happened to, and that's too bad because I don't typically. I mean, I had 9Nuke 6000 that worked great for a long time, and I never had any issues with it. But I know enough people that have had issues with them as well, so that's kind of sad. And yes, I am under the weather. Thank you for asking, Bobby.
All right, here's a question. This is working on a box, a pair of the good old school Sony Explode subwoofers, 212s, dual voice coil. So I'm assuming you're going to tune that down to 1. I'm wondering if 2 cubic foot tuned to 30 hertz, currently stuck at the port, having a difficult time calculating the port. So that's interesting. I think that 30 hertz is probably tuned a little bit too low for car audio for most people. I don't have any direct experience with those subwoofers. I know that they were sold here in the US for a number of years. I know they're pretty durable subwoofers, and I think they didn't age well from a standpoint of their design. And so a lot of people kind of like to rag on them, but from what I gathered, they're perfectly fine subs. What do you think? 212s in a 2 cubic foot box, Nick? That seems a little small to me.
The 2 cubic foot box seems incredibly small for that low of tuning. Especially for 212s. For 112, that might be, a decent size. 2 seems.
And I don't have the TS parameters for that. I don't know what the manufacturer specifications are, but most of the 12s I designed are going to be in a 2 to 2.5 cubic foot box. And so a pair of 12s, I'm thinking, 1. So a pair of 12s, I'm thinking a 4 cubic foot box. And for most car audio purposes, you're going to want to tune closer to 35 hertz as opposed to 30. And then what's going to happen, it's going to be a lot easier to fit the port in the box. So as the box gets smaller, holding everything else constant, same tuning frequency, same port cross-sectional area, the port has to get longer. So so as the box gets smaller, the port gets longer, and holding everything else constant, as the tuning frequency gets lower, the port gets longer. So what you're going to have is a port that is as big as the box. That's a lot of port area, it's going to be a huge internal port inside the enclosure. So I'm thinking a bigger box, at least 3 cubic feet for the 212s, maybe 4, maybe 5. I mean, I would lean more towards 4.5 or 5.
I don't know if these are them. No, I don't know if these are them, but these are the ones that I found that were dual voice coil Sony Explode. So I don't know if these are. The thing that I've always hated about car audio is that they like never give the TS back. Like I'm looking, where are they at? I always love this too. 420 watts rated power, peak 2000. Okay, well, why don't you just throw 5,000, 10,000, whatever. I mean, I know I get it, but I'm just I was looking to see if I could get any specs off of it. And unfortunately, I don't see any unless it's in their manual or something. I don't see any. So I can't even tell you unless you had that, but it sounds small. Actually, I just pulled up this. Let me see what I pull up on this. I don't know.
While you're pulling that up, I'll continue on my diatribe. So,
okay.
Now, the other big thing that people talk about with their port calculations is how big the port opening should be. My rule, if I'm just giving, off the cuff advice, is to make it as big as you possibly can. There are people who will tell you, 12 cubic inches per square foot of box volume. I don't think that calculation is based on anything real. None of the calculations I've seen when I open up Loudspeaker Design Cookbook are based on that. They're all based on Xmax and cone area. So you need the port opening big enough so that your port can breathe and you don't get chuffing. So I'm thinking, 15-inch tall, 2-inch wide, 3-inch wide slot port at the minimum. And then from there, you figure out your port length. So make the box bigger, tune it a little bit higher, and that'll make it easier to actually get the port in the enclosure. As far as the exact math, can't do that without more TS parameters. And even then, it's kind of be hard to model it live here. That'll take a little bit of time. And I do actually have a somewhere, if I can find it, a spreadsheet. Actually, it's a spreadsheet I make available to my patrons where you can actually calculate port tuning frequency. So that's kind of a deep question as far as the math goes. But I would say make your box a lot bigger and tune a little bit higher, and you'll have an easier time fitting it in.
Yeah, give me just 1 second. I'm almost there.
And I'll answer Brian Steele's comment as well. Larger vents reduce the usable bandwidth of the box. Sure, that's true, but in my experience, most people make their vents too small.
Yep, I agree with that. I'm actually modeling it because I'm curious. I don't even know if this is the right speaker, but I'm just curious now. What is going to happen with this? I think that's way too small. Right. And I think you're right. But let's just see.
And there are online calculators to calculate port tuning. It's pretty easy to find that out. So if you just want to build a box that's 3 cubic feet or 4 cubic feet and tune it to 35 hertz, you can find an online calculator for that.
All right. So he was going to do 2 cubic feet at 30.
Yep.
Or 2. Ooh, that looks awful.
What do you got?
Let me share the screen. Let me just
sure.
To share the screen.
While you're doing that, I want to answer a comment real quick.
If this is the right, well, I'm good. Let me just share it.
I'll take a second. I'll answer a comment. Someone bought one of those Hyanka subwoofers and they blew it after 12 minutes of playing. So much for sound advice. You know what? I had the 12 and the 15-inch Hyanka, and I beat the ever living hell out of those things, and they did not die after me just throwing way too much power at it and killing it. But I'm sorry you had a bad experience with the product. Send it back to Amazon if it blew. If you think there's something wrong with it, reach out to Hyanka. I don't work with Hyanka. They sent me a sub. I tested it. It sounded just fine. I had no problems with it. And I'm really sorry you had a problem with that subwoofer.
So this is the response. And that's true. I mean, and who knows? Like, we don't know what they did. They could have put it in the wrong size box. They could have, gave it a lot of,
and it could have been have been a dud, right? There, some percentage of everything that comes out of a factory is going to be a dud.
So this is what I would. I cannot make it any bigger than this. This is
okay. I made it a little larger on my end.
All right. Unfortunately, like, this is a really bad response. Like you said, it would need to be tuned higher. But even then, if we go to like maximum power, actually, you know what? We're not gonna have maximum power because I didn't put in the
right
Xmax of the thing because I was just trying to figure out box size.
So what's on the screen right here is called a transfer function, and this is an approximation to the frequencies that the subwoofer play. And can you tell me what size enclosure that is?
That's 2 cubic feet. So here's the deal. Well, he said for 212s. If these are the right subwoofers, which I don't even know if they are, this would be much better off for a sealed enclosure. This really doesn't play well for a ported enclosure. I wouldn't recommend this particular subwoofer for an ported enclosure unless you're going absolutely large. So this might be one where, for example, it would be better for an isobaric because then you can cut down the box size. The original box size it wanted me to do was 15 cubic feet.
Okay.
And then it wanted to tune it to like 20 hertz or something. And that does look good, if you want a 15 cubic foot box. So, I mean, there's definitely some ways that you can tune this better or whatnot. But in general, it looks like these 212s want a relatively large box if you want to tune these low. So I would probably recommend those 212s sealed if you have the ability to do that.
Well, if you can make it ported, you can make it sealed. So maybe the best way for those subwoofers is 2 cubic feet sealed. That's not too far off, probably.
No, and you're probably right. I didn't actually test the sealed, but it would be a much better response sealed.
So the short answer, make it bigger if you're going to go ported and tune it higher. And maybe consider doing it sealed instead of ported. It might not be the best subwoofer for a ported enclosure. And again, I don't have the subwoofer in front of me and don't have the actual specs. So just like Nick, I can't answer that question without more information. So hope that helped. Hope that was worth tuning in all the way from Nigeria, my friend. So we're glad you're watching, even if you weren't able to answer your question accurately.
Well, I think we answered it as best as we could. Yeah, I would definitely do that sealed if that's the particular subwoofer. I think you'd be much happier with the response.
Are the Alpine status speakers really worth the money? Or are you better off building your own Dayton audio system? Thanks. Well, thanks for asking the question. I don't have any direct experience with the Alpine status system. I do know one person that's using their stuff. He was a guest on our show. He's over in England. Raw Cat is his YouTube channel. Yeah. I would go check out it's RAW. Is it KAT or CAT?
No, it's CAT.
CAT. There's a hyphen, right? RAW hyphen CAT. It's like it's a rocket. He's trying to make a little play on words, and so he does DSP tuning on his channel, and he's got some Alpine status speakers. And I would go check his channel out and see what he says about them. For me and my money, I doubt I would ever pay Alpine status prices. If Alpine were to send me some, if Alpine's listening, I'd be glad to change my mind. I'll be glad to listen to them and see if they're worth it or not. He's tried them so far, and he's raved about them on his channel.
I feel like he just did a test on one of the Alpine. I can't remember what it was. I can't remember if it was the tweeter or the DSP or something. And I feel like he was not as impressed with them.
Oh, also he didn't pay for those. A dealer sent those to him. So good luck finding someone who can afford them. When you get to that kind of price range, there's things like Morel's out there and that are really good speakers you might want to look into. And I like the idea of just kind of going to Parts Express and picking out stuff. Parts Express are beginning to roll through Black Friday sales right now, by the way, if you want to check them out. Because I've kind of did that with my 3-way front stage in my truck and had good effect. I'm not saying don't buy them. I'm saying they're expensive, and I can see why someone would have pause.
Yeah. And honestly, we talked about this last week about, what point is there where you're spending so much money that it's not as big of a difference as something that could be considerably less. And I would have a question about that myself. At what point in time do you get diminishing returns? And
you get diminishing returns.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's the case with those Alpines, but I would consider that it might be because of the price.
How much are they? Do you know how much they are? I mean, maybe they're more expensive than we think or less expensive.
No, but based on everything you were saying, I just assumed that they were very expensive.
I know they're expensive, but how expensive are they?
Let's see. Alpine status at Crutchfield. Crutchfield sells them. So let's just see what Crutchfield says.
I've got them.
The HDZs are $1,000 for the 6.5-inch 3-way component set. Just not like crazy expensive. 2-way $750.
That's a 3-way set for $1,000 with the crossover. I've definitely seen much more expensive 3-way sets. In fact, I like Down for Sound's 3-way sets, $400, and so hopefully this would sound better than those. That doesn't seem that bad out of line. It's still a lot of money, but it's not.
Although you're talking like over double.
Yeah. But it is a 3-way set, so it's not like you're getting. I mean, there are a lot of 3-way sets in that price range, Focals and stuff like that. I would pick these over Focal.
Really, you think so?
Well, yeah, but there's a reason, right? I have a thing against Focal.
Okay.
And
what's your thing against
Focal story? So I walk into a stereo shop in a town nearby. Yes. And I'm asking questions about speakers. I'm trying to think about, do I want to buy something or not? And I said, what's this brand right here? I've seen them before. Focal. What is that? And then the salesman says in the most, I don't know, the
condescending
pretentious voice ever, he says, that's pronounced Focal. They're French. And I'm all like, okay, I won't be buying any Focals anytime soon just because of that. He had the need to correct me. Hey, we got a super chat.
Yes. By DIY Hi-Fi. Once again, if you haven't watched his channel, check it out. He's got some really great stuff going on right now.
A lot of high-end mobile brands exist to be sold by dealers that often offer financing, often to people with disposable income. And that's
a good
important
point.
too. $1,000 if you make $25,000 a year, $1,000 for a set of passive components seems like a lot of money. If you make $250,000 a year, $1,000 for passive components isn't much at all. So that's relevant right there. I mean, really, it's about your budget. And the beauty about buying the components ready to go is that the crossovers and everything are already set up for that system. You don't have to worry about all the DIY parts. So there is something to be said for spending that much money. I thought they were more expensive than $1,000 for a 3-way set. I thought they were to be $2,000 or $3,000.
Real quick, Kuru Densetsu said, "Ooh, Parts Pros has the KBD 4100 on sale right now." It's true. It's actually cheaper. I was actually going to post something on my page earlier, and I haven't got a chance to yet. It's actually cheaper than the 4x. So that's 4x100. So 400 watts total, supposedly. I don't think it will do that, but that's actually cheaper than their 4x30 right now. Their 4x30 is like $2 more or $3 more. So it's really good price. If you've been thinking about messing with one of those KBD boards, this is definitely a good time to buy one.
And the DSP is the best part of that thing, right? You don't buy that for the power, you buy it for the DSP.
You buy it to mess around with the DSP and do some cool stuff with. Yeah. I mean, that's
right.
You buy it for the functionality, right? You buy it because
Right.
it has so much functionality. You can decide what you want to do. Like the 4x100 could be a 2.1 amplifier because you can tell it, this is just to a subwoofer. This can do that. It can be a 2.2 subwoofer.
Right.
It can be a stereo 2-way amplifier. It can even link up with another one if you want to buy two and then use it in 2 3-way towers left and a right. I mean, so there's a lot.
That's what I want to do. I would love, if I'm ever going to mess with those again, that's what I want to do. I want to link them together and build like studio monitors that are self-powered, bridge 2 of the channels inside of each speaker to go to the woofer. Imagine something like the Dynas with the bigger woofer, like the cool ones you just built, for example.
With
and you got a
Zarbo,
tweeter control. Yeah, with Zarbo, a tweeter control, a mid-range control, and then a subwoofer would double the power. And it says 4x100. I feel like I tested one time with the Amp Dyno, and it was not that much power. They don't make as much power as they claim, but these aren't things you buy because
capable
of the power.
Of that, but you have to give it the right power, and everything in the world has to go perfectly right. Whenever someone says that on these DIY boards, it's really just saying that's what the chip is capable of. It doesn't necessarily mean it was implemented in a way that can actually output that amount of power, and usually it's not.
Okay, here's a woodworking question: the best way to cut 21 4-inch holes. That's a lot of 4-inch holes.
CNC.
Well, if he had a CNC, he wouldn't have asked, but I agree with you.
Well, he asked what's the best way.
The router jig takes forever to set up for each hole. Would a hole saw on a drill press work for 1/2-inch birch? A hole saw on a drill press, if you already have the drill press, might be the best way to go. It'll take a while. What I would recommend is to cut one hole with the router and use it to make a template, and then go to a router table and then route it out on a template, cardio fabrication style. That's the way I would do it.
I would do what you're saying. I would not what you're saying, what he's saying. I would do a hole saw, assuming the hole saw works correctly for your size. A hole saw, if not set up correctly, can actually cut a bigger hole. So make sure it's cutting out the right size hole. So if it does that, I would do that because all you have to do is mark the center holes for it. And it's really easy to mark the center holes of it and then just go straight down with the hole saw, take you no time at all. And I think that's what I would do.
Would it be worth the trouble to get a 4-inch Forstner bit? Do they make 4-inch Forstner bits? And would it be worth the trouble if you could find one?
I mean, I don't think it's worth the trouble.
All right.
Because that would be a lot of torque to go through that.
Now, the next thing is if you do it on a drill press, set up some kind of jig with stop blocks so that you don't have to constantly mark things and recenter things. Because what I'm imagining you're probably doing is 21 4-inch holes like in a baffle for a line array or something like that. Or you've got multiple speakers you're building that you're going to put together various parts. 3 holes in each board, 7 boards, something like that. I can see a 7.2 surround sound system. So if you're going to do that, you want to do as many jigs as you can so that you have make repeatable cuts without measuring on whatever tool that you use. There's a woodworking channel, Woodworking for Mere Mortals, that has some older videos on how to set up a drill press to do that.
Yeah. And I've made a ton of holes with a hole saw with exactly like what you're saying with that. And I did not do it. I just made sure I marked my centers. One of the best ways to mark your centers that I know how to do, at least I should say that, is, get a center hole punch. So that way you can start it after you've marked it. And then a combination square is a real nice way to mark how far down you can draw a line all the way down, and then just make a T cross wherever you need to start the center of your hole. And then just take your center hole punch, pop it in there. You're good to go. And then, just set it up on the drill press. Just make sure that your drill bit is in the center of your hole punch, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
It all depends on
block so you can do the next step.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it. There's really no right or wrong way to do it.
All right. We got a lot of questions rolling in. I don't know if we're not going to get to all these tonight.
Well, seeing as we have at least 9 already started, there's no way.
Yeah. I've stopped looking at the live chat because of all the questions we've got. Which one do you want to hit next?
Someone had asked a question about here. I actually didn't read it yet. This is scary. Okay. I'm working on a Bluetooth box. I purchased a large ammo speaker kit from Parts Express.
Okay.
I got it wired thanks to Justin's video. I want to add a battery meter and MagSafe charger. I've searched YouTube for hours with no solutions on how to do it. Is it possible? Where can I learn how to do something like this? So a MagSafe charger and I don't know what a MagSafe charger. I know what a battery meter is, but I don't know what a MagSafe charger is.
I Googled MagSafe charger and I still don't know what it is. There's a wireless charger that's being labeled as a MagSafe charger.
I know what he's talking about. He's talking about a MagSafe for your magnetic, for your, like my iPhone has a magnetic charger. So you can, it magnetically connects and then it charges. I think that's what he's talking about when he says MagSafe charger. So MagSafe is the term.
Okay.
Actually, adding a MagSafe charger is really easy. I even have a video on how to do this on my channel. So you can watch it. Everything in your boombox should be 12 volt, I would imagine. So I'm assuming it's 12 volt. What you can do, let me see if I have any here. I don't, but you'll know what I'm talking about. You can buy these for like 10 cents now because they are so cheap. Granted, you might have to buy like 100 of them, so it might cost you $10, but you'll have 100 of them on. You'll never need to buy one again. You can buy. Hey, Justin, can you put me back on the screen?
Yeah, hang on 1 second. How's that?
Okay. Yeah, you can buy those little things that you plug into your cigarette lighter. What does that do? That changes your voltage from 12 volts to 5 volts. That's all it does. It's a little converter that converts your voltage. Just buy one of those, connect your positive and negative to it, and then now you have a USB port. You can plug anything you want to it. Anything you want. It doesn't matter. Anything 5 volt USB.
Yep.
And I have a video on my on Toyd's DIY Audio. You're welcome to look it up. I'll show you how to tell which one's positive, which one's negative, where it goes to. It's an old video. It's not a great video, but it will get you what you're doing. As far as the battery thing, once again, you just plug that to the positive and negative of the battery. So that's easy enough. So you're just going to run a wire to the positive and negative of the battery.
I'm glad you knew what a MagSafe charger was.
You know what? It took me a minute because I was going to I was gung-ho and I'm like, I'm going to buy all these MagSafe components for my boss. I haven't bought anything MagSafe. And now I'm going to get rid of the iPhone, so it doesn't matter.
I thought you were an Android person. Didn't know you ran iPhones.
Hey, we got a super chat real quick, bud.
Oh, super chat. I missed it. So Bran Aiken, is the GSG Audio BTS ported box a good match for the Kraken 21-inch? Nick's giving a yes. I'm not familiar with the GSG Audio BTS ported box. Is that who sells that?
So GSG Audio does, it stands for behind the screen box.
Oh.
It's designed for like real thin applications for behind the screen. Like if you have like an acoustically transparent screen, they're a great company. They make some beautiful enclosures. They can be relatively expensive, but the quality that you get is worth it. And so in general, they actually designed the BTS kind of as a, it works with 21-inch subwoofers type thing, but it's my understanding that that was one of the subwoofers that they used to test it.
Well, there you go. That's good. That's why both of us are on the show, because we neither one of us know everything. That's great information. I did not know that.
You can always talk to GSG. They're very nice. I've talked to them behind the scenes as well, and they will also answer that question for you as well. But I am almost certain that they tested it with this, and that was a really good subwoofer combination. But they can let you know if there's anything that I don't know to be concerned about. But I don't think there is.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. Another question. Let's see if we can get through a few more of them here. Any recommendations on a box for a Crossfire C5 12-inch powered by the JP8? So this is the Crossfire C12. The Crossfire C5 12. And that looks cool. I like the looks of that subwoofer. I have no experience with Crossfire.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Nice hefty basket.
Dual magnets,
I have no
right?
experience with Crossfire. It looks like that's the right amp for it. I would take a look at one of their profab boxes and see if it'll fit. Without knowing the TS parameters, I can't tell you for sure what to go with.
Do they not give any on the website?
Not on this website. I'm certain that it's probably in the owner's manual, or it is on Crossfire's website.
I hate that. Don't you hate that?
Yeah. No, I wish I could give you an answer, but I can't give you any exact specifications for it because I don't have the specifications to give an answer. So it's a good looking set, though. Box recommendations for this.
So when in doubt, go sealed. There's some truth to that, though, right?
Yeah, this is something that's going to require a more detailed answer. You need a model and Win ISD to know for sure. And without the TS parameters.
And I'm just going to tell you, we're joking, but I'm being somewhat serious too. Some of the things that you can find out about sealed boxes, one, you can change how the box reacts with your subwoofer by adding some stuffing to make it feel like a little bit larger. But in general, a sealed box is a lot more forgiving than a ported box or poorly done ported box. So you can usually have to worry less about the power output that you're giving it and things of that nature. That's not going to say that you're going to get a flat response or anything like that, but that's what I always say. And when in doubt, go sealed.
My friend Brian Steele here has a question. How do car audio manufacturers know what car to design for when designing crossovers? The overall response will be affected.
I have an answer for this.
Go ahead.
I got sick this weekend.
Okay.
So I didn't get my video out, but
okay.
I have a video coming out about this literally, if I feel good enough to record it after I get off tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'm not going to answer the question completely, but I will tell you this. I will answer it this way. They don't. But there's a lot larger, better answer than that. And I will give that in the video. So I don't want to ruin that because I got the video coming out like tomorrow.
There's always kind of a short answer, long answer to these things. The short answer is
they don't.
And the long answer is as soon as you feel better, you'll upload the video.
Yeah. And there's actually there's something that I suspected for a long time that's going on with these. And I think Brian already knows the answer. That's probably more of a tongue-in-cheek question.
Probably right. Because there's no way they can know. And I think Okay, here's something that I've said for years. I know I said this back when High Five Vega was on the show with us. I think that they're designed to sound good on a wall inside the car stereo shop, so that you can sit in front of the demo wall in the car stereo shop and pick this speaker and then that speaker. And I think the crossovers are designed for that. So I think they would probably sound pretty good in a home audio setup. But I mean, who the hell knows where the tweeters are going to be relative to the woofer when you sell these things for cars?
Yeah, and I will say this too. If you guys have a question about like what box, what speaker and whatnot, try to send us some TS specs next time, because we have no problem answering those. And if I can throw them into WinISD real quick and get a decent idea, I'll do that for you. But if you don't give us any specs and we can't find them, there's, unfortunately, there's not much that we can give you as far as answer wise, because we'd be guessing. We'd have to tell you whatever the manufacturer recommends.
Right.
We talked about last time. We don't always recommend what the manufacturer recommends.
Right. What do you guys think of the 12W7? I just bought one. So that's the JL Audio 12W7. So the 12W7 is one of their kind of high-end premium. That 7 line is their top of the line subwoofer. That's the one, if I understand correctly, where okay, compared to this Crossfire right here. Well, I guess I could probably look up one if I wanted to. Basically, you bolt the woofer down and then you put the surround down and put a clamp on it to hold the surround down, which is kind of a different way of putting a subwoofer inside of a box. I don't have any experience with one. I know people who say they're absolutely amazing, but I also look at a 12W7 and it's a little more expensive than I personally can afford for a subwoofer. And I hope that you enjoy your 12W7. I hope that it's worth every last dime that you paid for it. So I wish you the best of luck with it. That's what I always hope for people, that they enjoy their equipment. So I hope it's a good deal for you.
It's a big magnet on that thing.
Oh yeah, it's well-built subwoofer for sure.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things you can look at for a subwoofer, is it a stamped steel frame? Is it cast? What kind of binding posts are they putting on there? What type of magnet structure? How big is the magnet? Those types of things can tell you a lot about how well the subwoofer is built. It might not tell you how well it sounds or how good it's going to be, but it will at least show you that they put some thought into the process of it. It looks like a nice subwoofer. It's weird though, because I'm looking at it and I don't see any holes to mount it. So how the heck do you mount the darn thing? Oh, you mount it from behind.
So that's what's interesting about it, right? So the surround comes off. So there's a clamp that holds the surround on, and so you unclamp it and fold the surround back, and the bolts are there. The bolt holes are there. And so you then screw it down into your box and then fold the surround back over the edge of the subwoofer and then clamp it down. And that's kind of cool because it means that you get, okay, let me, you want to pull up an example of it so we can see it.
Well, it doesn't mean you get anything more. Yeah.
Well, okay, this Crossfire right here, right? The surround is, I don't know, you can't see me pointing on it. All right, you've got a surround, and that surround takes up some of the space, right? So the cone isn't as big as it potentially could be because of the surround. So this JL 12W7, the surround starts here at the edge. So all this space that's edge and the mounting flange is now where the surround is on that JL. So you get a bigger cone on your 12-inch subwoofer.
Maybe, because what we're talking about is the volume displacement, right? So what we're talking about is surface diameter times Xmax. Surface diameter times Xmax talks about how much air can be moved by the subwoofer. The more surface diameter that you get, which is what he's talking about, allows you to get more volume displacement, assuming the same type of Xmax, right? So let me present this sub and let me explain to you why. And I don't know, I don't know if it is or isn't, but the halfway point on this is where we measure SD, like halfway to halfway. Mm-hmm. So it's possible that it offers more, but it's also possible that this surround is just significantly bigger and it's not really, it's more like an optical illusion than it is actually offering you physically more. But it, like if it goes in more on the sub, right this way, then you're not necessarily getting any more.
Well, we can look up.
I don't know, because these all look like drawings. Yeah, right. Yeah. If they have the specs and it gives you the SD, which it might.
Let's see.
Parameters right here. Parameters. It doesn't. Oh yeah, SD. 84 square inches.
84 square inches.
Or 0.0542 square meters.
So let me look up like an Ultimax, for example, which, you know, an Ultimax 12 is 1/10 of the price. So that's that's an important thing to consider. So
That's a good
give me a
call, yeah.
second. Specifications.
Well, actually, you know what you should look up? Don't look up the Ultimax, look up the Max X 12.
Okay, well, I've got the Ultimax in front of me. So the Ultimax has a surface area, surface diameter of 490 centimeters squared. So we just got to convert squared centimeters to.
Well, it's just a little bit more then, because this is 5, I think. Let me double check it.
Right, it's just moved the decimal over twice.
Yeah, it's 5.4.
5.4.
54.2. I'm sorry. What was yours? 49?
49. So you get from 490 square centimeters up to 540 square centimeters.
Yeah, so you do get a little bit more,
right?
And that's what I'm saying. And then you'd want to multiply that by Xmax to see, like, if it had less Xmax, then it may not make as much difference. That looks like it has a lot of Xmax.
Oh, it's got a ton of Xmax.
But this is why I told you to check out the Max X. The Max X, they actually did some work on it to make sure that you get more SD out of their 12-inch versus the Ultimax. And the SD is actually 514.7, so almost 515.
Okay.
Now that only has an Xmax of 15.5, where I'm sure this Xmax is
29 millimeters.
Yeah, I was going to say probably significantly more.
Yeah, 29. One way, 29 millimeters. So it's got a ton of Xmax, and it's got a slightly larger cone area.
So it's going to move
the advantage of it. Yes, it's definitely going to move more air. I mean, it's a $1,400 subwoofer, and so that's out of the range of most people. And Cape Cod Potato Chip, if you can afford one, God bless you, man. That's awesome. I'm glad you've got one. You know, but it's a great subwoofer. There's no doubt about it. It's just a little on the expensive side.
Real quick, I wanted to answer. Yeah, I mean, if you bought 2 of the Max X's, it's basically would end your, giving it. I mean, I don't know how much wattage that Alpine takes. I mean, it has to be taking a ton of wattage. General specs, 1,000 watts RMS. Actually, it's not as much as I thought.
Yeah, 750 is our optimum.
Yeah, 750 to 1,000. It's actually not as much as you. I was going to say the Max X, 2 of them would basically be equivalent to one of those, supposedly at max power handling.
And that's it. I mean, if you're short on space and have plenty of cash, it's probably a good choice. But most people are short on space and short on cash. And so, I mean, when you can get a really good subwoofer for 1/10 of the price, it's just a hard sell. And I think that's one of the, and that's what I think about it. I think that it's a really great subwoofer, but it's a really hard sell at that price. And I doubt they sell that many. It's probably more of a halo product to kind of show off the brand.
And I think that's one of the reasons why the Max X is such a great price, great value.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it has 514, which is actually a little bit more SD than the Ultimax. I'm going to guess the Ultimax actually has better excursion. I think that was 15.5. I don't know what the Ultimax was, but in general, that Max X is a great value. As long as you don't mind the stamped steel frame, it's a great value.
And another thing to consider as well, nobody knows what the Dayton Audio Max X is. I tried to sell my 10-inch Max X locally on like Craigslist, and I just kept dropping the price. The subwoofer in the box I built for it, and nobody wanted it because no one knew what it was. No one wants, they want to see a brand name. So, you're going to, if you want to resell a JL Audio 12W7, there's probably people out there who would gladly give you, $200 less than the new price for a lightly used one because of the name. So there's reasons to get it.
Hey, before we get going, I know we're ending up in time. I wanted to answer this question. He said, "Hey, I saw that video I'm still a newbie. I still don't understand how to wire it. The red and the black wire in the video, it shows you where to wire those to the cigarette lighter. Those just go straight to the battery. It's that simple. Battery to that, and then you run whatever USB cord you want into it. So it's that simple. It goes straight to the battery.
All right.
We have more questions, but I think we're out of time, right?
We really are. And if you were feeling better, I'd say let's charge on and answer a few more questions, but you're not. So
I'd rather
I know
not.
you're probably exhausted. So thanks for sticking around with us, even though you're tired. Usually when I'm sick, I just phone it in. It's like, I'm sick, I'm done. Nick, I hope you feel better.
TVOR for saying that he hopes I feel better. I appreciate that, man.
What do you have coming up next on your channel, Nick?
Well, that depends if I can get healthy. If I get healthy, I'm going to try to get that video out tomorrow for the car speakers. So a lot of people have been wondering about that. I'm going to be testing out these Polk Audio car speakers right here.
Excellent.
Which are DB Plus. They're actually, not cheap speakers. They're about $100 for a pair of 6.5 inch, which is definitely not cheap. Not expensive either, but not crazy cheap either. So I got a pair of these. I tested them, distortion both low and high. I tested the crossover, see what's going on with the crossover. We had a question about that on the crossover earlier today, and I'm going to answer all those questions because I have long wondered the same thing that Brian said. How do they just choose like how it's going to sound? And this is a little bit different even so, because this is not a component set. This is a coaxial set. So they already have the tweeter and the woofer there and the crossover. So you would assume that the crossover is designed perfectly for these speakers. Is it not? I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you what I think that most car manufacturers do. And I'll show you with these particular speakers. I did do a really cool build. I'll try to get some pictures up here for a boombox that I built a friend. And so that will go up on the channel. And then I have one for this 3D printer over here, which I think is by far the best one for someone to buy just to start off with. So I'll show that out with. If you want to mess around building some enclosures and things of that nature, I think it's a really cool thing. So
we plan to do another live show next week on Nick's channel. So our that's the plan. So the plan is to do Q&A shows as long as we're both feeling up to it and as long as we don't have a guest. And then after next week on Nick's channel, we switch back over to my channel. As far as what I have coming up next on my channel, Nick, and absolutely nothing. I mentioned last week that I've injured my knee and I'm still limping around on it. And it's the kind of thing where standing and working, out in the garage for 30 or 40 minutes or an hour at a time really hurts like hell. So until the knee gets better, I might not be doing anything. I might be out of commission for a little while. I'm currently waiting on insurance approval for an MRI. So we'll see how that goes.
Dang, that's serious.
Yeah.
So I'll give you guys a sneak peek on that boombox as well before we go. So this is it. It's called the Dana, and then it's walnut and hickory, and then it's got the nice leather handle, and then the back of it. Oh, there's a little video. Is a little saying for the person who bought it. They wanted this little saying, so we used the laser engraver to laser engrave that too, which is kind of cool. So
awesome.
That's it.
All right, we're gonna end the stream.
All right, see you guys.
Y'all have a good one.